Hey, I'm Ange.
And I'm Beck.
And we are the Gold Diggers, because we believe there's gold found in everyone.
Everyone is unique, interesting and exciting with a great story to share.
And we aim to find it.
The question is, can we rise to the challenge and strike gold? Stay tuned to find out as we chat to today's mystery guest.
Honey, you're my sugar.
So this is how it works. One of us knows our mystery guest and the other doesn't. And today it's Beck's turn to discover the gold in our special guest, Evalyn Parsons. Welcome, Evalyn.
Thanks, Angela.
Welcome to the show, Evalyn.
Thank you. Great
Nice
to be
to
here.
have you.
Thank you.
So it's really great to have Evalyn. She is such an incredible woman. I can't wait for you to discover all the gold in Evalyn. But to send you out of the room, I'm just going to give you the fact she's 44, has been married for 22 years. So exactly half of your life.
Correct.
You've
yes.
been married.
Yep.
Well,
She has 5 kids. And here's a little bit extra for you.
Yes.
She gave birth to all 5 kids completely pain-free. Pain
What?
relief. No pain, not pain-free.
Oh.
No pain relief.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
That is. Now, Beck's got 4 kids.
Yeah,
so-
and I had them all with an epidural. On the
Well,
other
I will
side
correct.
of the
There was
scale.
my very first one. I did have a half epidural, so I will correct. The true fact is, and then after that, I was like, I don't like not feeling in control of a situation, and
Yeah.
if you sometimes pain is actually a meter to control a situation. So after that, I was like, I just don't. So yeah.
So here you go. This is where we're going to go in this direction. She is like Superwoman.
Awesome.
Not Superwoman, but definitely slightly crazy. So.
So I'm going to send you out the room.
All
while
right.
I introduce
Off I
Evalyn.
go.
So I've kind of introduced you as Superwoman, and in my opinion, you really are. You're like one of those people that whatever you put your hand to, you just nail it and you accomplish it. And you've accomplished so much in your life. You are an incredibly successful businesswoman. You own a hairdressing company here called Evalyn Parsons Hair,
Yes.
of which I get so many compliments on my hair, even
so
today.
awesome. Yeah,
like
wonderful.
the colour and everything. And, you know, I come to you and your team. How many people you have got on your team?
It fluctuates between 12 and 14 because I have some casuals and permanent. So I think at the moment we're sitting at 12.
Yeah.
And that's mainly hairdressers, but we also have some admin team and managers running as well. So
And, I mean, in your salon, it just all works to a T. It's a beautiful salon. And you've built this basically from scratch.
correct. Yes.
And have even become the #1 Australian hairstylist, wedding hairstylist of the year for 5 years in a row.
Yes. That's
That
correct.
is an incredible accomplishment.
Thank you.
I mean, it's huge. Plus, you're raising 5 kids, some of which are homeschooled. Is that
yes,
correct?
correct. We homeschool the high end, sort of 10 to 12, sometimes from 8 or 9 if we feel like it's appropriate or suitable. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also know that like you love keeping fit, you run, you do
Yes.
Pilates, you like to hike, you're always travelling.
Yes.
I've seen you're from, where are you originally from?
My parents were both from the Netherlands,
Yeah.
so I'm a first generation Australian. So I was born in Australia, but to Dutch parents. And I have a brother who lives in Amsterdam, so we travel. We love travelling over to Europe, particularly, and seeing him and travelling around Europe. So
Yeah, and your
Yeah.
particular passion really is to inspire and empower women, and in particular with marriage as well. I
Yes.
know that you really do have such a successful life, not just in your business, but across the board. Your family, your kids, everything. You are just such an incredible role model. And I know that you are to me. And I think if ever there is an example of a woman that can really nail it in every area of her life, I think of you straight away.
Thank you. I don't know if I quite deserve that higher praise, but thank you. I really appreciate
We
it.
do, and I think you're such a great example to people, and you have an awful lot to offer because you've got great wisdom in these areas. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking that. And I know there was a particular time in your life that a significant event happened that really changed the course of your life.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
And so we'll go into that
Yeah, perfect.
when Beck comes back
Sure.
in, and
Yeah.
we'll see what gold she reveals.
Sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, let's bring her back in.
Honey, you're my sugar.
Here she comes. Bum, bum. Yeah, you don't want to get me singing. That's not a good start.
So not quite the podcast.
No. That's a great title for a podcast.
Not quite the podcast.
Not quite the podcast, yeah.
Oh, so Evalyn.
Yes. Hi.
Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So 5 children.
Yes.
First of all, well done.
Thank you.
I have 4.
It's a house full, but it's awesome.
So what ages do you have?
Our oldest is 19 and our youngest is 4, nearly 5. So we've got a 14-year span.
Yeah.
We had the 2 boys and then we had a bit of a break before we wanted to go. I'm like to be planned and organised in my life. So I had a strategy around 2 kids, a break and 2 kids.
Yeah.
Partly because I wanted to keep doing my career and running my business and also just felt like it was a chance to enjoy 2 kids before you rushed along and had more.
I did exactly that. Had
Okay,
2 kids,
yeah.
had a break, then had the 2 kids.
Perfect.
But basically, because the first 2 were such a handful, I got them to school and then I had a break.
Yeah. You needed to like pace out. I did have
They're
like
great kids.
Yeah. And I think whatever your family is what you know, and it becomes your normal anyway.
Yeah.
It just took a bit longer to fall pregnant with our 3rd, and so by the time she was born there was a 6-year break. And then I remember she was only a few weeks old and I said to my husband, I'm not ready to stop at 1 more. I feel like we're definitely going to have at least 5. And he was going, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Greg's always loved being a dad and having kids, and he loves babies. So
Yeah. And you obviously do too.
yeah, absolutely.
That
Yeah.
kind of worked in your favour considering you had 5. So yeah.
Correct.
Definitely.
Yeah, we talked early about having a big family, and I come from a big family. I'm one of 5, although there was 6. My mum and dad lost my sister before I was born.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I grew up with, and it was really important to me. And when Greg came into my family, he really loved the dynamic of it and felt like this is something he wanted as well for our family. So
A big family's great, isn't it?
It is.
Christmas times, meal times,
Yes.
a lot of noise, a lot of chaos, but it's great.
It's a really strong sense of belonging
Yeah.
because you're like kind of like a circle, and everyone has connects to each other, and you've like that strength of belonging just keeps increasing because there's so many people that say, you're my person, you belong to me. And so there's a lot of power and strength in that. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
So when you're not busy being a mum, what are you doing?
So I'm a hairdresser.
Yeah.
I trained after I left Year 12 when I was 18. So
Yeah.
I've been hairdressing for 26 years now.
Great. You must be really good at it.
I'm passionate about it.
Yeah.
So I'm always improving my skill. I
do
never
you do
arrive.
Angie's hair?
One of my stylists does Ange.
Yes.
So she comes to salon. It always looks great.
Ange has awesome
She's
hair.
got a great head of hair, though.
She does.
I do have a lot of
She
hair.
does have a great
it
head
can
of hair.
cause some problems.
And she always goes all sorts of beautiful colours. So no, Ange comes to the salon. I do clients now, only like a small group of clients 2 days a week, and I still style hair for weddings.
Yeah.
So I actually started my own business 19 years ago. So hairdressed for 26, but 19 years ago. We moved to the coast. I was pregnant with our son. And when I was 37 weeks pregnant, I started my business.
Wow. At 37
At
weeks.
37,
Why
am
not?
I not surprised?
Registered an
Like,
ABN
you know
and
what I'll
like,
do? I'm
but
kind of
let's
bored. I'll
go.
just start a business.
No, I
Knowing
wanted,
you, Evalyn, I'm not surprised by that. But yeah.
I really wanted to I always want to be moving forward. I like growth. And so I wanted to have a plan. I like to be pre-planned. So it's like, obviously I'm having a baby, but as soon as he's stable, I want to be. And I started a wedding hair business, so you don't get a wedding the next week. You have to book in advance. So we literally moved here when I was 34 weeks pregnant. At 37 weeks, I started the business. And I think I did my first wedding expo, to promote the brand when Micah was 3 months old.
Oh, wow.
And Greg would bring him to me for a feed, and I would I think it was in Caloundra, it was Caloundra Bridal Expo or something.
Because that would have required a lot of preparation as well to get to an expo.
Yeah, and we had no money. It was we were 24 and
Yeah.
Greg had just started his first full-time teaching job. So we did it on a very tight budget. So I think Greg designed it all, and I think we got stuff printed and laminated and yeah. And also it was 2004. So it was before anyone had social media or even websites were a bit uncommon.
Yeah. It's much easier to promote your business now, isn't it, with
Yes.
social media and technology?
Yeah, I think the catch though is it can be quite shallow promotion. You can promote really easily, but how deep is that going, and how far are you, how successful or how deep is the roots of your business?
Yeah.
Someone could wake up in the morning and start a new Instagram profile, and be off and running by lunchtime, but the work it takes to actually build roots deep into like an industry and to build reputation and stuff isn't quick. So I feel like it's actually given people a bit of a false sense of like the reality around a business.
Yeah.
I mean, the first couple of years, the only way I could get my name out about bridal hair was to like pay for advertisements in bridal magazines or go to wedding expos or like go myself to venues and introduce myself and say, you know, this is who I am, this is my business, like would you be willing to recommend me, and ask for recommendations and like build relationship.
Yeah.
And so, I think it was harder work, but it was like really rewarding and it created really deep roots in my business.
Yeah, and great connections.
Correct.
So you really had to hustle, don't you, back then?
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to be really determined it's what you want to do, because it's not like easy work. You don't get like a quick hit. You don't get a quick DM or a quick like on your... You could do that magazine ad and hear nothing for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, or like brides would like maybe clip the ad and not be ready to book for 6 months.
Yeah.
So you do a lot of work and not get that instant gratification from the result. But I think what happens over the long term, though, is, like I said, the roots of the business are so deep, and then there's just so much trust in the brand. And so I do have relationships in the bridal industry side that people I've known for pretty much the whole time I've run my business.
Yeah. Right.
And they will always recommend the brand.
Yeah.
Or
Are you still doing bridal hairdressing now?
correct, yes. So I still do weddings myself as a director stylist, and then I have a team of wedding stylists that work below me as a team.
Yeah.
So brides can choose if they want to book me to have me personally, or if they just want to book the team as part of the brand.
Yeah.
So I sort of do a bit of both, because we have this. I opened the salon 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So I had the wedding business 19, and then 12 years ago I opened my salon. So
that's amazing. So you began it when you had your first baby.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
So you sound like, I'm gathering you're very much a go-getter.
Yes. I absolutely do intensely dislike being still.
Yeah.
I make myself be still because I know it's really healthy for my nervous system, but I don't like it that much. I love active holidays and being busy. And
are you feeling fidgety at the moment just sitting here?
No, I'm okay because I'm talking. So I'm doing something.
Something's engaged.
Yes. And I've recently just picked back up knitting after doing a lot of craft when I was young, because I've realised it's something else I can do if I have to sit still for a while.
Yes.
I've just spent time in a hospital with my son last month, and knitting really helped me because it was like this really active, productive thing to do while sitting still.
I love knitting.
Yeah.
I haven't done it for a while, but
so therapeutic.
I think with a grandchild on the way, I need to pick up those knitting sticks again.
Yes, absolutely.
Knitting needles.
Oh, please don't fall into that typical grandma image,
they will be
you
very
beg?
cool looking clothes, let me just tell you.
I will say the patterns out these days are pretty amazing. That's actually what's pulled me back into it. Is back in years ago, like the patterns were they all looked the same. It was like big baggy jumpers but all these little knitted tops now that look like designer tops. They're beautiful. There's some amazing Instagram knitters that are like really young and trendy, and their patterns are beautiful.
Quick story, when I first got married, I knitted a jumper for Tony, and he said, make it the biggest possible size that's on the thing. And I'm like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I want the biggest. I want it really baggy. So once I finished knitting it, it was so big. It was like a blanket, and he never wore it. It took me ages. I'm like, that's your jumper done.
Oh, no.
You can use it as a blanket. But anyway.
I was going to say, you could always like unpick it, but you'd really have to like take the whole thing back because it's the width.
I was over it by then.
It was a bit like me trying to give, when me and Noel first got married and I made him this meal. It was my first attempt at really kind of making a meal from scratch. Well, starter went really well, but the main course was peppered steak. Well, I poisoned him, didn't I? And he went upstairs mid-meal and threw up.
Oh, no.
Because what I'd done is I'd prepared the peppered sauce for 7 people, but put it on one steak.
Oh, no.
And so, yeah, it burnt his
very
esophagus.
peppery.
Yeah. So from that point
Did
on...
you eat it?
I scraped the sauce off. I knew what had gone into it, so I scraped it off. So from that point on, cooking never really went down well in our family.
Definitely not pepper steak again.
No.
So you said you moved up to the sunny coast when you're pregnant.
Yes.
So where did you move up from?
Yeah, so I did my apprenticeship in Toowoomba, met Greg there, got married there, and then moved to Brisbane for a year. I really wanted to. I love adventure and I love going to new places and discovering new things. So I was pretty determined not to stay in Toowoomba.
Yeah.
Greg was happy to just go along, like, well, let's do something different. So we really loved Brisbane, but I then fell pregnant with Micah in Brisbane.
Yeah.
And Greg at that time was supply teaching, and he needed like a more permanent job if I was having a baby. And so he just applied for lots of jobs, and we just like, I guess, trusted and believed that the right job would come along, and he got a job in Caloundra. So we moved. And it was like this bizarre thing where we were walking down over the hill towards Kings Beach with a baby in a pram going, how did we get here? Like 12 months ago, we moved to Brisbane. At that point, we weren't quite thinking about having kids yet.
Yeah.
And then 12 months later, we're living at the coast with a baby. It's like, wow.
Your life was completely different.
Life is not how I thought, but that's fine. I like planning, but I also like dynamic life.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to adapt and realise that that's real life, that you can have a plan, but that inside that you've got to be adaptive and you've got to kind of
be a bit flexible, move with it.
Yeah, I'm not interested in like stress and anxiety, so I'm more interested in like pivoting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, isn't it? Just being able to move with things, because if you're too structured, it can be very frustrating when things don't go the way you plan, can't it? So it's just like there's ebbs and flows.
And it's real life, you know, things happen, health and like job situations and all sorts of things change.
Yeah.
You know, if you have no plan, you go nowhere.
Yes.
And so you have to have plans and you have to have goals. So you've got like a focus, and it sort of is that creates momentum to move forward. But sometimes you have to have little pivots in that road and go, okay, I've got momentum, but we're going in a slightly different direction.
So were you always like this as a child? Was there anything that happened in your childhood that took you on this path of adventure and just going for whatever you put your mind to?
I think it was probably always there.
Yeah.
I was definitely probably a little bit more reserved in primary school. I feel like I went through, up until the age of 12, there was some things happened in home that made things a bit sort of stressful. So I probably wouldn't look back and go, I was like really pushing hard on life in primary school. I was just, sometimes I was a bit anxious about going to school or a little bit nervous, whatever. But around the age of 12, when I hit puberty, like I just kind of like a light bulb went off for me, and I just felt like I started to get like excited about things I wanted to do. And I also started homeschooling at that point, and I think that was a really big thing for me. I had a lot more freedom I had goals that I had to get to, but I had to push myself to get there.
Yeah.
And I had to activate that inside of me. And I think sometimes we put ourselves in very comfortable positions where we don't have to draw on or activate resilience or strength or like stuff inside of us.
Yeah.
And I feel like that homeschooling for me, and mum and dad were running a business, so I was helping them. We were kind of living on site. So it was all these dynamic stuff happening in my life. And it sort of just made me realise, you can actually do a lot. It's actually really motivating. And mum and dad had a roadside fruit shop. It didn't close till 7 p.m. every night. We lived behind it. And I remember my mum, I was about 12, and mum said, well, you either close the shop down or you cook dinner, because by the time we closed the shop at 7, it's too late to start cooking dinner. And I was like, well, I'll cook dinner. So I just went and bought like a recipe book from the shop down the road, because we had a fruit shop. So I bought a fruit and veggie recipe book, and I just like started cooking dinner 5 nights a week.
That's brilliant.
And I think that's probably always there. I mean, I've got immigrant parents. Yeah. They both came to Australia from their homeland, and they both had to work really hard to make a living and to get ahead. And I think then there's that nature and nurture combination where mum and dad are both like very like industrial, entrepreneurial people. So like there's that DNA.
Because you have to find your way in a new country, don't you? And so where did they come from?
The Netherlands.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. So both mum and dad met in Australia, but they were both from the Netherlands.
I can see that in you, actually.
Yes.
You look Netherlandy.
Bit of a Dutch, Dutch vibes.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, so first generation Australian. But I do think like people who immigrated were the people who were willing to take the risk, and the people who stayed were the ones who wanted to be comfortable. So I feel like, you know, Australia's made up of those people, isn't it? Of people who took the risk.
Yeah.
And so I think that I see that in all my siblings. There's a similarity in all 5 of us to this kind of like we're all fairly high functioning, busy, like sort of like go-getting people. And we all married sort of calm, sort of settled people who all like pull us down and slow us down a little bit. Yeah. And sometimes when we get together, all the in-laws kind of talk together about how full on It all up.
It's like you're complimenting each other.
Correct.
Well, could you imagine being with someone who's equally as a
Yeah,
go-getter? It just wouldn't
It
work.
wouldn't be
Oh,
healthy.
you'd be torn in
no.
all different
Yeah.
directions, wouldn't you? You'd
Like
be I want to go that way. I want to go that way.
Absolutely. Like I actually reflect on like my late teens. I was probably escalating. I would say from 12 on, I was escalating in my like drive and like ambition. And then I remember like even on my day off, I would schedule my day in like 15-minute increments about the amount of things I wanted to achieve in a day. And I was friends and house sitting with uni students who were like, "You are crazy. Like, that's weird."
Yeah.
I was like, "No, I've got so many things I want to achieve. This is the only way to do it, is to like sort of micro multitask." And then I met Greg, and it was like, has really taught me that it's also okay to just stop and have a coffee, or to just rest for a bit, or to sit and eat a meal, not eat in the car racing to the next thing. I wouldn't say that change happened overnight, but over probably a 10-year period, he taught me that I needed to like make allowance for that. And then I've probably taught him that like sometimes you just got to push through. You might be like feeling tired or there's lots happening, but you just got to push through and you can still achieve a lot.
You sound like the perfect personalities for each other. So.
We do work well.
Yeah.
We work well together. Yeah.
And so was there ever a time in your life that was like a turning point where you just went from one way that you were going and then an event happened and it changed the way perhaps you looked at things or what you were doing?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think there's probably 2 or 3 like that in my life, but there was a significant one when I was in my late teens. So I grew up in a Christian home, and I've definitely had a faith in God and an understanding about who God was in my life. And but I also was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I actually was working in a local town where I lived, and I went and took one of my really close friends I worked with. We went away for the day to go do some fishing, and I was driving my brother's car, and I was like 17, and you sort of feel like you don't have a care in the world. And on the way home from that trip, we were in a major car accident, and my friend was killed.
Oh, wow.
And so I was 17 and he was 16, and he lost his life. He was the passenger. Car had direct impact on his side. I was like, the car was like folded in half, pretty much had thrown into a ditch, and I was unconscious, and it is a complete miracle I survived. And actually 5 minutes before the incident, my mum was working. She worked in a plant nursery, probably half an hour away, and she was planting, and she said that this overwhelming feeling came over her so strong that she couldn't keep working to pray for me.
Oh, wow.
And it was pretty amazing.
Wow.
And so she just said she had to drop the potting and just stood there praying.
Oh, my goodness.
And 45 minutes later, she had a call that from my brother, I think, to say we need to race to the hospital. And I'd been taken by ambulance to Toowoomba Hospital, which was about 30 minutes away from where we were living in the Lockyer Valley. I sort of woke up in the ambulance and was trying to sort of put everything together. And all I remember, I remember the seconds up to the impact, and I don't remember anything from the impact, which I also believe has been an amazing grace for me, because I think that for people that is an incredibly traumatic thing, but I don't have a memory of the direct impact. But I just remember waking up in the ambulance and saying, "What happened to Jason? Where is he?" And they just wouldn't answer me. And that's when I knew, like, you get that feeling, but you just know that something's really wrong.
So how did that affect you straight up, learning that Jason had been killed?
So I found out in the hospital for sure, and I felt like incredibly emotional, but I was also in like a lot of pain, and I had like a lot of things happening to my body. So I didn't really find out the full story about how it all played out until a lot later. Both Jason's parents and my parents were told to come to the hospital, and they'd heard sort of through like, local rural communities that someone had passed away, but neither knew who had. So it was really traumatic for both sets of parents. When my parents got to the hospital, they got taken in, and his parents were left in the waiting room, and then the police came to see them there. So it was a very difficult time. I had a collapsed lung and a broken collarbone and a cracked pelvis, and I had like lacerations over my body. Like, it was just, there was a lot going on. So I spent a couple of weeks in hospital, and I missed Jason's funeral. So yeah, in the short term, there was a lot of like just initial physical and emotional challenge. Mum and Dad had also lost my sister when she was 11. And so this brought up a lot of trauma for my mum and dad.
Yeah.
So there was it was a pretty full-on time. Like life in a moment had just shifted completely.
How did you navigate through that time? How did it develop?
So a lot of people were praying. My sister jumped on a plane. She had 4 young children, lived in Sydney, and she just jumped on a plane and came up. I think initially you're just trying to figure out what even happened and how you even feel about it. And then you're kind of a bit numb. Jason's stepfather and grandfather initially came to visit me in hospital and just say, like, we don't blame you. So what had happened is I'd gone through a giveaway sign. I looked both ways. I didn't see a car and I drove through, and there was a car coming along that stretch, and he had a 100 zone, but they think he was probably going over. He looked to wave to someone in a paddock. He didn't see. When he turned back, we were right in front of him, so he didn't brake or do anything to avoid the collision. He just hit us at full speed.
Oh, wow.
So we were in front, like we were in his lane. We were almost across the road. We'd already crossed the one lane. We were on the other lane, so we were nearly across the road, and he just completely plowed into us. So
Did he survive?
yes,
Right.
he had a really bad shoulder injury. He was in a 4-wheel drive ute. I was in like a tiny little 2-door Gemini, and he T-boned us. So we were obviously the one that had the greater impact. So the next season was really difficult because it kind of kept unfolding. So the police then wanted to interview me, and there was lots of like legal stuff. I had to get a solicitor. The police then charged me with dangerous driving causing death, which is like a manslaughter charge in a vehicle, dangerous driving causing grievous bodily harm, because of the injury to the other gentleman who hit us. So then that's kind of like makes you responsible for both.
Well, even though he hit you.
Correct. But because I crossed like him, then it makes it my situation.
Yeah.
The story around that intersection is that 7 people had died at that intersection in 10 years, all coming from the same direction, all having the same situation. And even though it sort of should be easy to see because it's farmland and paddocks, there's this kind of visual eye problem where there's a straight line of a crop, and if it lines up with the roof line of a car, or just the car's just below it, when you look across, you actually don't see the vehicle. And that's sort of what happened. And in fact, 18 months after our accident, another girl in the same way, coming from the same direction as me, went through the intersection, but a truck hit her and she passed away.
Oh, wow.
And they finally closed that road down.
Right.
But my court case was still proceeding. Like, there's always a lot of time in this.
What were you looking at as a conviction?
Jail.
Really?
So it's a criminal charge. So that's like a manslaughter charge. So you go to court, you have a jury, they decide like if you're guilty or not, and then what your time is.
How were you feeling at that time?
It was a very emotional time.
You were only 17.
I was
weren't
17.
You?
I turned 18 a few months later. So I was like 17 and a half. I think I turned 18 about 3 months after the accident. So I've been driving for 9 months or something. The other thing that happened is that we lived in a little community and everyone knew him, probably more than even knew me. And I worked with him in the same business, and we were like really close friends, and we were in a small group of friends. And when people grieve, they get angry. And when they get angry, they need someone to blame. And I was a great candidate to blame. And I don't blame them for hating me. But there was this whole situation then around.
You were dealing with a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I lost was not just Jason, but I lost like that part of my life.
And your community.
I kept working at that place, but it was very difficult. I went through a really emotional time. I cried every day. I would just be like somewhere and I'd just start crying. I found it quite hard to manage my emotion. I felt like as the year went on, it got harder. I remember the anniversary being the most difficult time. And I think too, because the people I was working with, I was still working there because I'm also like committed to like, in all of that, I haven't lost that part of me that says I've committed to a job and I've got a plan in life and I've got to keep moving forward. I'm not going to just hide in my bed. So I'm not someone who's ever going to not face what's happening to me. And so I just kept showing up to work, but people wouldn't speak to me, or I'd come in a room and they'd stop talking. And on the 12-month anniversary, that whole group got together and put like a special note in the paper about him, and then they didn't tell me. And I remember first feeling really devastated, not that I just lost him, but that of the whole circumstances. My brother worked with me, and he really supported me, and he was 2 years older than me. He was an amazing comfort in that time. And my parents had lost my sister, so they understood grief. And so I learnt a lot about grief in that time, and my mum really helped me with that. That grief is like waves. like you walk towards like a wave in the ocean and it like kind of washes over you, but then the wave passes and you can kind of keep walking forward, and that it doesn't just go away, but if you walk towards it and through it, it does get easier.
It's a good way of looking at it.
Yeah, it was really... I guess Mum explained it in her way, and then the way she sort of explained it, then I translate into that way, and that's how I could picture it. You have to find a way that makes sense to you when you're grieving. But also...
But didn't you have to like completely move away from that community?
Yeah, so Mum and Dad kept living there, but I found basically decided I need to make a new life and that I need to leave this behind. I think there was a point around... So it just wasn't getting any better? No.
People weren't forgiving you?
So, because what actually happened is that at 18 months after the accident, we went to court. I had a solicitor. I'd been through like a whole heap of like meetings and interviews and police interviews, and then we went to court, and the court was to decide to send me to trial or not. And I had an amazing solicitor, and they obviously presented like those circumstances around the that intersection and the visibility of the other person and the fact that he didn't swerve to meet us, and that his impact, like if he had, for example, braked or swerved, like it would have been a completely different scenario as well. And so she did an amazing job. The police, they'd asked the police to back down on the criminal charges and reduce it to a traffic offence, which would have meant I would have like lost my licence for a period of time and had a fine. But they said, no, we want to make an example of her, and so we're not backing down. And so we won that case. So the magistrate took their time and they came back and said, there's a shared blame. We're not sending you to trial. You're acquitted. You're free.
Well, that's an answer to prayer, isn't it, really?
Absolutely.
But how would you think that scenario's framed your life moving forward from that?
I think what happened is that it made me realise that, number one, like without God, we're nothing. Like you look at life and death in a very different way.
Yeah.
And I also realised that I tried on my own to get through the first probably 9 to 12 months, and that I actually realised that you can't fix your own heart on your own, and you can't fix things on your own, and that like God made us, he's the one who can heal us. And so in that time, I experienced the comfort of the Lord in a way that you can't describe or tell that to someone else unless they're in a really dark time of grief. But I felt like almost a physical comfort from the Lord. I used to lie in bed at night and cry, and I would feel like a physical feeling like of his arms wrapping around me. And it's like, I actually say to people that I really believe that God can actually reach inside your heart and like heal it. And only God can do that. You can't heal that by like therapy or other things. Like there's things you can do to help, but you can't heal the tear. And I believe that in that time I had to have a point though where I said, I'll let you do that, God, because he still gives us a choice, always that free will to say like, you have to let me. And I really reached that point where I just laid it down. And I remember it happened. Someone asked to pray for me. I said, no, I'm fine. And then eventually I said, okay, pray for me. And then something broke in me and I cried for a number of hours. And I remember laying it down to the Lord. And when I woke up the next day, I felt like the guy in Pilgrim's Progress that had been walking around with the backpack. And then the backpack was gone. And I actually felt like this, like I was a new creation. Because I'd gone through this trauma, and even though the trauma and that was even before the court case and everything had happened, but I felt like God healing and repairing me. And I actually believe that like it taught me two things. It taught me that you can come through incredible trauma and incredible difficulty and you can still be whole. That I don't carry that with me. There's not a wound in the way I have a relationship with my children or my husband or my friends. And the other thing is that it also taught me that, like, without God, like, you're just an empty shell, you know, like it just sort of he gives meaning to everything, and you can come through that and you can heal, and it can be like a scar. You don't forget it, but it's not like a festering wound. There's a wholeness in there. And I think that process took me about 3 years. And I actually remember when God led me to a place where he said, okay, like, it's time to move forward now. And it was about 3 years. I actually went to Jason's grave and I sort of acknowledged and remembered him, and I didn't stop remembering him after that, but it was like moving out of like the raw grief stage and into a stage of like wholeness. And that's around the time I met Greg. And he used to say to me, I wished I could have been there for you in that time. I was like, no, because I wasn't whole then.
Yeah.
And I'm whole now. And I think too is that people often, I don't know, for me personally, when I meet people and they don't know that story, I have had people say to me like, well, you don't know what tough stuff is because like you're just a happy person. You haven't had tough things happen. And I think it's just that people don't realise that actually true joy comes from surviving tough stuff and that then it's a deep joy. There's a sense of like, I always say that, you know, great suffering brings great strength in us.
Yeah.
And that strength is that real deep joy that everything you see in life, you look through that lens and go, I'm so grateful for this. Like I went on and met Greg and had 5 amazing children. I've got an amazing business. And, you know, I did lose some friendships in that time and that was a sad thing, but it actually also pushed me to go forward and go, I can still have a life and it's not going to steal that from me. And that, you know, sometimes things happen to us by our choices and sometimes not by our choice, but regardless, we still have to get through them and that we can still have a whole life beyond that at whatever age we are. I mean, I was young, but you could be at any age and go through such a difficult thing and be renewed and be whole again.
Because you really do have that sense of like grabbing life and taking everything from it that you can. You know, Beck pulled out about the sense of adventure. You're so successful in your business, your marriage, your family. Like, do you think that laid the foundation for you to just give life everything you've got, as if I've been given a second chance at life, I'm going to make the most of this?
Yeah, I think it shaved off a fair bit of fear about what could possibly happen because the worst that could happen happened to me, really, I think. You know what I mean? It took away a bit of that, like, oh, I don't want to push too hard because, like, something could happen. I don't know. Something when really bad stuff happens and you're like, oh, well, I survived that. Let's go. Like, even my mum praying for me and certain circumstance that happened that made me really feel like God's given me this chance, like, and this is a life I've been given. Like, life is a gift, you know, and it's like so short. And so I don't want to waste a minute. I want to see every part of the world He's got to offer. I love His creation. I love seeing the world. I love people. I want to like share life with them and I want to hear their story and like have that impact me as well. But I think I was on that track, but it was very polarizing that it just kind of made me go, okay, no more time to be afraid. I went on then. I actually went on after that and did my apprenticeship and started hairdressing. And even that, I'd sort of been skirting around the edges. What am I going to do? I was like, right. I think 3 months after the accident, I started my study in my apprenticeship. So I was still recovering physically. It took me 12 months to recover physically, but I was already well into my apprenticeship by the time I was fully healed. Because right, I've got to do this. And I mean, I was weeping on the bus to the TAFE and back, but I was still like determined that I wasn't going to let it hold me back.
Wow.
So,
Incredible.
Yeah. Well, I think we're ready for some gold.
Ready for some gold?
Yes.
There are a few things that are yet to come out, but let's hear the gold.
Oh, okay. Should we listen to some more things that are yet to come out first?
Well, she's had some pretty major accomplishments in her life.
Well, let's
some
hear
national
about that.
awards.
Yes.
Do you want to share about that?
Yeah, so in our wedding spectrum, it's something like we talked about earlier that we've done for quite a long time. So over the years, we've entered different awards and done different things like that. But over the last 5 years, we've won #1 wedding hairdresser in Australia.
Yeah, wow.
For the last 5 years running.
That's amazing. Yeah. Every year for 5 years.
Correct.
Amazing.
And 7 years for Queensland, 9 in total, but 7 consecutively. And then you have to win Queensland to be eligible for nationals. And to win nationals, you have to have been in business for a minimum of 4 years. And there's a lot of rules around that.
How do the other finalists look at you and they think, oh no, I'm up against Evalyn again?
Yeah, look, I mean, it is what it is. You've got to work harder. We're all in the race. And I mean, there's a point of
That's it. It's like,
if you want to win, work harder. I mean, I think the thing in that, the thing I love about that award is it's not for me personally. It's for my brand and the team.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the success of my business and brand and the success of the salon isn't about me on my own. Sure, I've had the vision and drive to kind of go the way we go, but I've had amazing people partner with me. So I think that. And when we win that award, it's about them as well as me.
Yeah.
And it's about how the business runs, not just about one certain, like we don't just do one hairstyle and get judged on that.
Yeah.
It's actually voted by our brides.
Yes.
So their rating for us is how they choose, like how the winner gets allocated. So
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
I know.
there you go.
Congratulations.
Just a little side note.
Yes.
So what gold are you going to pick? Because there's enough there to...
Honestly, it was actually so interesting to hear the perspective of someone who's survived a car accident that the passenger didn't, and to hear your heart around that really moved me to tears, actually. And to hear what you went through, I can't imagine the pain that would have caused, and the pain that you were surrounded by at the time as well, of the town that went through that. But to hear of your faith and believing that God is the center of your life, and him getting you through something. Like when I first met you, when I saw you today, I would not have picked that you've been through that. And that's the strength of your story, isn't it? Is that you have just been renewed because of your faith. Like that's been healed. You still have that story, and you still felt that pain, and it was as bad as it was.
Yes.
But you don't have to carry that anymore because God carries it for you.
Yes, correct.
And you're just so vibrant and full of life. And I just keep getting the word fruitful. You've just like this fruitful vine that is continuing to just turn the soil, and wherever you're going, you're just creating harvest for your whole life. And I think you're amazing, and I think you tell the amazing story of God's love for people.
Thank you.
And you know, I think Evalyn is a perfect example of a work-life balance. Now, I don't know whether you feel that, but just from an observer into your life, your 5 kids are thriving, and I know some of those have got big demands. You know, I know one of your children has some significant health issues that take a lot of time, take you out of your job, out of work. And you and Greg have obviously got this system that's working for you, where you can support your family 100%.
Yes.
You support each other 100%. You support your team 100%, and you give 100% into every area, and they're all flourishing. As Beck said, it is really fruitful, and it takes a lifetime sometimes for people to even be fruitful in one of those arenas, but you've got them all working, and I think you have so much to offer and such great wisdom to share, that, you know, I just hope that everyone can get a taste of what you've got, and maybe you should write a book or something and put that down there.
Okay,
the books are coming.
Yeah,
definitely. I've got about 20 I want to write, so I just have to figure out where to start. I'm
sure you'll schedule it in somewhere.
I'm like, how to take 5 kids to Europe on a shoestring. Oh, that's a good trip. Oh, that's a good book. Or how to talk about like how to raise kids in today's world. You know, I think there's so much that has come from my own life experience, and I'm far from perfect, and I certainly don't always get the work-life balance well, but I think it's having the priorities in the correct order means that you can keep resetting that, and it's understanding really clearly what are like the key values in your own life, and then making sure you only majority invest in those. You know, like family is number one. Well, God's number one, and below that is my family, and so but then they free me to go and do my work. But if like when Isaiah was in hospital, then I just reschedule work because he's more important.
Yeah.
And it's about understanding that clearly, so that you don't always get it perfect, but that you get the order right, and and then that makes it come back to balance.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any perfect one, but some weeks you think, oh my gosh, I'm so tired, I've probably worked a bit too much, and other weeks you think, oh, I could have done something different. But I think it's that balance, that perspective of where our priorities are, and what are we actually going to spend. We get 168 hours in a week. What are we actually going to spend it on?
Yeah.
So often I feel like people feel like they don't have enough time for things, but it's because they haven't got their perspective right. They spent 10 hours on Instagram or whatever, and then feel annoyed they didn't achieve something. It's like, if you've got clarity around what your values are, then you're going to spend your time more like
time
management.
Productive.
Yes.
Yeah, and you're not. But the less effective your time is, the more frustrated you feel, and the more frustrated you feel, the more likely you are to procrastinate. The more you procrastinate, the less you get done, and then the cycle just keeps going, doesn't it? So
definitely there should be a book coming from you, Evalyn. I
come
think.
and see me when you've written it.
We'll see.
Thank you so much for being with us today. You're such an inspiring person, really, and thank you for sharing
Thanks
so
for having me.
vulnerably.
like I can talk. I love it, but I really appreciated the opportunity to share my story too.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
grateful that you shared your story with us today.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Honey, you're my sugar.
So you can't tell me you didn't cry through that podcast.
I did, and I know you did too.
I know, very emotional. Like, just I felt her in that moment, like as she's reliving that experience of one of her best friends. You know, it's got to be one of your worst nightmares. And I always feel for people that I hear that are in that situation. I always wonder, how does that moment feel? How do you come back from that?
Yeah, that's right. And you often hear about these accidents happening when teenage kids get in the car together. There's an accident, the driver survives, but some of the kids die or one of the kids die. And you often think about, like, how do you get over that? Or how do you live with yourself if you were the driver? And so to hear her perspective on it and to hear that story come out, it was really interesting, like really emotional. And I'm so pleased that she's come to the space that she has and is just embracing life and giving it all she's got because she got that second chance.
Yeah, and I think what comes through in her attitude to life is her gratitude for it.
Yeah.
And I think that has obviously created this incredible world for her where she is so successful in so many things. And I think gratitude is such a key element of living a fruitful life. As you said, and like seeing success in life. If you're grateful for everything, if you're grateful for the stuff that you have, if you're grateful for your business, for your kids, for your marriage, you know, I think you go into those environments with the right attitude.
Yeah.
And it brings back rewards.
That's right. And her faith is obviously a big factor in the healing for her during that time. And she puts a lot of emphasis on that, which I thought was great. Like, that's something that has pulled her through, the prayer surrounding it, so that she can live the life she's living now.
Yeah, it's such an important anchor in her life, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, so I just think she's, you know, such a great example to not just women, but women in business, to mothers, to wives, and she's got so much to offer. I can't wait to see what more comes from Evalyn. So that's it for today's podcast. You'll find us on all the major podcast platforms. The podcasts come out every Wednesday. We'd love to hear from you on our socials, the Gold Diggers Podcast. Tell us about your story so we can find the gold in you.
Easy as pie, lemon, apple or cherry. Loving you is so very sweet, sweet, sweet. How can it be such a piece of cake? And your smile is the icing. Loving you is a party. Honey, you're my sugar.